Hi and welcome to the channel. Today we're gonna broadcast Chidoshi Ron Van Clief. What can I say about Ron Van Clief? It's for me one of my greatest inspirations since I was a kid in martial art was Mr. Ron Van Clief. So today we're gonna take a look at the story of the Black Dragon and how everything started, right? And they take also a deeper perspective about the career of Ron Van Clief in detail. Let's go in detail. So Ron Van Clief was born on January 25, 1943 in Brooklyn, New York. So this is the type of martial art that Ron Van Clief knows. Check this out. Chinese Goju Ryu Karate, Jiu-Jitsu, Ninjitsu, Taekwondo, Kung Fu, Arnis, Eskrima, and Silat. Wow, he have a lot of martial art background. I remember him. In the old movies. I remember the very first movie I saw was this movie called The Death of Bruce Lee. The Death of Bruce Lee. I watched it back home a long time ago in the all those old cinema, and since then I got hooked up with Ron really with his movies. I was fascinated by the way he performed his martial arts movies. It was just amazing. So without further ado, let's go get right into the story of the Black Dragon, Ron Van Clief. All right, 1, 2, 3.
I know Kung Fu. Show me.
Ron Van Clief stands among the pantheon of legendary martial arts actors. A charismatic presence on screen and a legitimate technician of the martial arts off of it. The Van Clief name is respected by Kung Fu fans as well as those in the sporting side of martial arts. While his name may not be as recognized as some of the biggest stars of martial arts, both film and sport, his journey and triumphs helped plant his flag atop the mountain of masters, entertainers, warriors, and survivors. His story is one of exciting highs and horrifying lows, but through it all, Ron Van Clief has proven to be a martial artist in the truest sense of the word. This is the story of the Black Dragon.
Oh, I can't wait to hear this.
Ron Van Clief was born in Brooklyn, New York on January 25, 1943 to Larry and Doris Van Clief. As a child, Ron loved comic books and movies, martial arts movies in particular. Whenever his local theater was showing kung fu movies, he and his younger brother would make their way to Chinatown and sneak into showings. Making their way in when crowds were leaving, from an early age, Ron was enamored with martial arts. In 1959, Ron scraped together as much money as he could from various chores and odd jobs to afford martial arts classes. He began training under Grandmaster Moses Powell, the founder of Sonukus Ryu Jiu-Jitsu, and once instructor to the FBI and Secret Service. The Sonukus system is a mixed martial art made up of mostly traditional styles with a modern sense of striking. This would have a major impact on Ron Van Clief's perspective of martial arts.
The martial arts, self-defense, karate, jiu-jitsu, what have you, it all gives you
This is fascinating because he took jujitsu, and that's a wonderful martial art. Let me tell you, jujitsu is not other than jujitsu, not other thing than jujitsu, Japanese jujitsu, and it's one of the best, in my opinion. It's included among one of the best ways to defend yourself especially on a street fight. It's an awesome. So he got a wonderful start. All right. All right. Let's continue. Yeah.
of dignity and pride and a lot of confidence. And take, for instance, the black community, my community actually, we have people that are really afraid to come out in the evenings. That's bad because they're part of the community too. And I feel that these particular people should get into martial arts as soon as possible so they can gain more of that dignity and pride and that self-understanding that they're not afraid. If a man or woman can fight back, sometimes they can live longer. So I think the martial arts is like a partner walking down the street with you. And in the black community, you should have it.
In the next year, he was also training in ninjutsu with Ronald Duncan, Shotokan karate with George Cofield
Awesome.
and Tom the Puppet, and Goju Ryu karate with Peter Urban. Each and every one of his teachers were veterans of the U.S. military, and as the son of a World War II veteran, Ron Van Clief knew where he was going next.
Yeah, he was in the military.
In 1960, at age 17, and against his father's disapproval, Ron signed up to the United States Marine Corps. Ron was sent to South Carolina, where he was struck with the culture shock of moving from Brooklyn, New York, to South Carolina in the middle of the Civil Rights Movement. In Brooklyn, Ron didn't always feel like a minority. The diversity of cultures and perspectives informed so much of his world, but in South Carolina, he was exposed to a level of violence and hatred that he did not anticipate. Despite Ron quickly adapting to his conditions, his temper and attitude would get the best of him at times. This resulted in fights with fellow Marines who refused to sleep in the same barracks as Ron or the 7 other black recruits. And one day, the decision to stand up for himself would have unforeseen consequences. One fateful day, after a frustrating day of work, Ron decided to take the bus. Ron was tired of being pushed around, and when he refused to sit in the back of the bus, taking his seat towards the front,
Ooh.
Ron was arrested. He was released a few hours into the night, collected his belongings and uniform, and when he stepped outside the police station, he found a mob of angry men waiting for him to come out. The men beat Ron within an inch of his life.
Ooh.
He lost teeth.
Wow.
They broke his jaw, his left arm, all before tying a rope around his neck
Wow, I didn't know this,
and
man.
hanging him. Luckily, Ron
Ooh.
survived. He spent 4 months in the hospital and half a year on lighter duty before being deployed to various places. He spent time in Fort Lejeune, North Carolina, and was stationed in Guantanamo Bay before making his first trip to the east. Ron was stationed in Okinawa, where he began studying Chinese karate under Tetsuo Shimabuki. He then moved on to the Philippines, where he learned Filipino arts. He spent his remaining time in the Marines, stationed in Vietnam, where he served for 14 months, manning M60 machine guns on helicopters and manning artillery. But one day, fate came for Ron once again. While on an everyday run, Ron's helicopter was shot down. A fractured sternum, broken ribs, and several shrapnel wounds would leave Ron in a body cast for 6
Body
weeks.
cast.
This would be the
Wow.
end of Ron's tour of duty. He was sent home and honorably discharged from the Marines in 1965. He took with him a sharpshooter badge, Marine Corps Good Conduct Medal, a National Service Defense Medal, and PTSD as a result of the events in South Carolina and his tour in Vietnam. Something he struggles with to this very day. After arriving back in the US, Ron worked as a New York City police officer from 1965 to 1968. At the time, Ron continued his passion training and competing in karate. He would expand his training with more styles. Ron went from Taekwondo to Muduk Kwan to Tong Soo Do to Nisei Goju to USA Goju. He competed in both full contact and no contact tournaments in the States and internationally, winning several national tournaments. But in 1966, Ron received some unwanted news. After only 2 years as an airborne paratrooper and 3 months in Vietnam, Ron's brother Pete was killed after running over a landmine. Pete was 22 years old, and he was posthumously awarded the Purple Heart. Pete's death and Ron's own treatment by his superiors and those he was meant to be fighting alongside made Ron feel immensely disillusioned.
Man, hold it. Man, this is really hard. Well, I didn't know he went through all this. This is just the beginning. I mean, this story just beginning. So I'm very happy. I'm very grateful for the one who posted martial arts film freak. Thank you for being able, because you post this, the story, because it's really giving me a lot of insight that I didn't know about Ron. Really, I didn't know he went through so many situations. But I believe it will help you along the way. This is what makes you stronger. That's what makes you feel why I want to move on. I want to go on. This is sometimes this setbacks, right? I want to help you to move forward. All right.
He wanted the experience of all of his mentors. Instead, he saw similar experiences to that of his father, whose time as a merchant marine in World War II drove him to addiction as a way of coping with trauma. While the 60s were a time of great stress for Ron Van Clief, his decade would end in much higher spirits. In 1969, Ron would attend an important tournament. The Japanese Exposition was held at New York Coliseum, and it is here where Ron won his first World Karate Championship. He took first place in the middleweight division and second place in the black belt kata. Ron quickly followed up the Japanese Exposition with a tournament at Madison Square Garden. And while he may have ended that tournament in second place, he impressed someone in the audience. Bruce Lee was awestruck with Ron's technique and speed. The two met and became friends.
Oh, I
And it
didn't
was
know he
Bruce
was
who
a Bruce
bestowed
Lee.
upon Ron a nickname that would follow him for the rest of his life: the Black Dragon. The 1970s would be a major career change
Didn't
for
know
Ron.
about it.
But on January 25th, 1971, Ron founded the Chinese Goju system. A short explanation. The term Goju has two contrasting meanings: Go, hard, and Ju, soft. Think of the Chinese ideology of yin and
Go
yang.
hard and soft.
The two must exist for a sense of harmony and balance. Ron wanted to combine his many years training in Japanese and Chinese styles, as well as blend with an American technical sensibility. The soft, open hand, defensive movements come together with Japanese hard offensive strikes to make up the Chinese Goju system. The 70s started pretty well, but it was time for Ron Van Clief to make another journey east. The source of Ron's passion for martial arts is rooted in Kung Fu cinema. So Ron decided to make his way east to Hong Kong. In 1973, Ron auditioned for the Yangtze production studio. After impressing the studio heads, he was given a 5-picture deal, the first starring alongside Jason Pai Piao in the aptly named The Black Dragon.
After the death of the Dragon comes a new American superstar. 16 years in the martial arts, 7th degree black belt, and 4
That's when I get to know Ron.
Introducing
He went hungry.
Ron Van Clief as the Black Dragon. We said enough. Now we'll let him do the talking.
Are you crazy?
The Black Dragon.
Okay, then.
Rougher, tougher, and stronger than anything you've seen before.
While Ron doesn't take the lead role in the film, his martial skill and charisma won fans in the studio over enough to give him his own lead roles. Ron Van Clief had become the first foreigner to play the lead role in a Hong Kong film. Over the decade, Ron starred in around a dozen films. According to Ron, he was able to do so many films in such a short time because each one only took about 2 weeks to shoot. Finish with one, start another. These films may not have reached the mass appeal that other kung fu films in the 70s did, but when they played in those same theaters that Ron and his brother would sneak into, the right audience found what they were looking for. And more people would find them with kung fu theater on Saturday afternoons in the 70s and 80s. When Ron was a kid, movies inspired him. Now his movies were speaking to a new generation of black kids. Now you would think that Ron would take a break from fighting while deep into his acting career, but you would be wrong. Ron had been quite fed up with the American karate tournaments at the time. He felt the style of competition wasn't legit enough, and if a specific organization was running the tournament, then they would rig it so that their preferred competitor would win. But the tournaments hosted in Hong Kong in the 70s were a completely different game. No more point karate. This was a full contact fight, last man standing. The only thing separating this from modern day mixed martial arts is that no one knew what ground game was yet. But Ron would jump at any opportunity to test his skill as a martial artist, something he would live by again in the 90s. Ron Van Clief was not in love with the movie-making world.
This is awesome because, check it out. So Ron officially started his acting martial art actor career in Hong Kong. He was offered a five movie deal. So the first movie was The Black Dragon. So when I first started watching, like Ron was in that movie, The Death of Bruce Lee. That's when I started watching. But then that movie comes with another 4. All right. So officially, it was cast. He went there for a casting, and then he earned the role. And he made all those movies there back in Hong Kong. This is fascinating. At the same time, saying that at the first time he was making movie, he also will do to a competition, martial arts competition, and then they say the way it's not by points. You don't score points. You do more full contact. And this kind of martial art, when you go to a tournament, it's more full contact than trying to win on points. This is a wonderful thing. So it means that's the right thing. When you're in that kind of martial art that will help you in full contact. Because this is the reality, guys. When we are taking martial arts, the kind of martial art that we got to take is the one that face reality. You know, reality is very important. That's why it's so important when we choose the kind of martial arts. All right, let's go on.
Is a martial artist first and an actor second. And what he found in the Hong Kong film industry was that his co-stars were oftentimes not just actors before martial artists, but they were just actors. Ron appreciated the opportunity and the recognition his films gave him, but into the 80s, his attention would often shift into publishing a book or two. 1981's Manual of the Martial Arts, 1984's White Belt Guidebook, and Green and Purple Belt Guidebook, and eventually 1995's The Black Heroes of Martial Arts. The 80s saw his film career continue in front of and behind the camera, and he even picked up a protege in both film and martial arts. The Last Dragon himself, Tai Mak.
Oh, Tai Mak.
In 1984, Ron was inducted into the All-American Hall of Fame. He would finish out the 80s teaching, continuing to compete, and appearing in films like Riot on 42nd Street. The 90s saw an aging Ron Van Clief take on his greatest test yet.
Wow, an awesome
Ron Van
career.
Clief is as legit a martial artist as one could be. He's a fighter who is looking to test his art and his skill in any way possible. And the 90s saw the introduction of the Ultimate Fighting Championship. A very different Ultimate Fighting Championship than we have today, but the Ultimate Fighting Championship nonetheless. And despite the words of warning from veterans like Superfoot Bill Wallace, Ron craved the competition. He saw the UFC as the only true test of fighting. And in 1994, at the age of 51, Ron Van Clief competed at UFC 4. In the first round, Ron was paired up against the top man in the UFC so far.
Yeah, I saw that fight.
27-year-old Hoist Gracie.
Tai Mak is there?
After 2 minutes, Ron was submitted.
Yeah, I saw this.
To this day,
fight.
Ron is the oldest person to ever compete
Yeah,
in
he
the
lost.
UFC. Ron took the loss in stride. As a true student of martial arts with a background in several styles, Ron saw his loss as an introduction to a new chapter in his life of martial arts. Ron took a brief retirement from competition for the rest of the decade, as he became the commissioner and recruiter of the UFC, as well as an instructor to the U.S. Secret Service. But the new millennium and reaching his 60s could not stop Ron Van Clief as he returned to competition in 2002. At 60 years old, Ron won first place in the 2002 All-American Karate Championship. This marked the end of Ron Van Clief's illustrious competitive career. Okay, well, that isn't the whole truth. This marked the end of Ron's competitive karate career. Soon after this, Ron began training in no-gi Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, the same style that had bested him at UFC 4. And in 2012, Ron began training under the very family name that submitted him, Royce's brother, Helson Gracie. At 80 years old, Ron currently holds a purple belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and has earned several silver medals from competitions. He has yet to capture the gold. I don't have any gold medals yet in Jiu-Jitsu, though I've won 6 silver and 3 bronze. But there's never anybody in my age division, so I have to compete in the younger one. My goal is to get my black belt and compete one more time as a black belt. I will compete as a black belt. Ron's greatest challenge didn't come on the mat or on camera. The trauma Ron experienced in his younger years, both in South Carolina and Vietnam, has followed him into today. Ron has frequently struggled with PTSD, affecting his sleep and his personal life. But no, Ron Van Clief has never let that get in his way. Ron has fought through the adversity of his struggles with mental health, becoming a 5-time World Karate Champion, a 15-time All-American Champion, a Black Belt Magazine Hall of Famer, a member of the International Sports Hall of Fame, the first foreigner to lead a Hong Kong film. He earned his black belt in Sanukas, 5th Dan in Shotokan, 9th Dan in American Goju, 2nd Dan in Karate, 8th Dan in Aikijutsu, studied Wing Chun, and most recently gained his purple belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And of course, founded his own style in the Chinese Goju system. But above his personal and career achievements is the effect he had on others. His on-screen persona and work on over 100 films has influenced martial artists throughout the decades. The Black Dragon, along with blaxploitation films of Jim Kelly, are the start of a chain reaction that led to films like The Last Dragon and the work of Michael Jai White like Blood and Bone and Black Dynamite. But away from the screen, Ron Van Clief is a mentor to thousands around the world. Ron has lived, taught, and trained across the globe. In his time, he has seen over 500,000 students come through his doors. Anyone who has had even the bare minimum of martial arts taught to them understands the confidence, security, and sense of self that can give someone. Ron has helped over 500,000 people from continent to continent achieve that confidence and gain that security. Add in the people who have been inspired by his films for one reason or another, and I couldn't even begin to count the amount of people whose lives Ron has impacted. Ron Van Clief's story is one of exciting highs and horrifying lows. He spent his entire life fighting in one way or another. He fought for his country and his brothers in arms, even if that country or those brothers never showed much care for him. He fought for his life, both in the jungles of Vietnam and the streets of South Carolina. But for Ron Van Clief, fighting is what drove him. His passion for martial arts became the driving force of his entire life, whether it was fighting on screen like his childhood heroes, or fighting on the mat like his real-life mentors. Ron Van Clief is a martial artist in the very truest sense of the word. And the most beautiful part of his entire story, from his achievements in Hong Kong cinema to his accolades in the sport he has devoted his life to, is that Ron Van Clief is still that kid who grew up in Brooklyn, New York, sneaking into cinemas with his brother and learning from Moses Powell and Peter Urban. Despite all the miles traveled, despite the loss he has suffered, and the scars he bear mentally or physically, Ron Van Clief never gave up on that one thing he discovered all those decades ago.
Amazing. This was one heck of a story, I must say. And I would like to congratulate the one who made this video. Wow, really, you really get the best out of Shidoshi Ran. Really, you get all the details that I was looking for all my life. So I really hope this can help. For those who don't know, Ron, this really practically have showed every detail, most I think, of his life. This is more, frankly, this is more than I was expecting. really more than I was expecting. I didn't know Ron went through so many things. He had a very tough time. Yeah, he had to went through Vietnam. And it's not easy because, to tell you the truth, guys, going through war is not easy. I remember back in the day, people were forced to go. All right, there was a time back home, back in Puerto Rico, where you will receive a letter. Somebody will deliver you a letter in your front door, and that letter, I think it was a yellow letter. You received a yellow letter. You were committed to serve in the army, and if you wouldn't serve in the army, chances are that they will, all right, they will give you a fine or put you in prison. So you got no choice but to serve in the army. So it was tough, and also his brother, he was lost in war, so it was tough. It was tough. It was tough to all the problems all the mental struggle that he went through, the loss of his brother, why he went in Vietnam. It was tough, really, and also why he suffered in North Carolina, right? So much discrimination that he went through while he was serving there, right? It wasn't easy. This was not easy, not an easy thing. But he helped them. What I noticed about him, he used all this situation to help them to grow more, to achieve more, to help others more. And I can tell that his passion for martial arts is bigger than I can describe. Right, all this time, look at all the achievement he had. He also created a martial arts system called the Chinese Goju Ryu. This is like a combination of kung fu with karate. This is awesome. He created his own martial art. He also competed in the ultimate fighting. I get to see that fight. I remember I ran that fight in VHS. That was like, I think, 1994, 1995. I remember I ran that movie in Blockbuster in VHS. That's the old school of ultimate fighting. And I saw him there. He was 51 years old, and then he competed with one of the Gracie brothers. And then, but then the style of Gracie was Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And then he submit, after a few minutes, he submit the Black Dragon. He submit Ron. All right. But he was brutal. I remember he just submit the guy. I remember that. But he used that also to motivate. And then he also studied. He's holding a purple belt now in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So he's looking forward to get soon maybe his black belt. So this is amazing. That's awesome. This is awesome, man. You give me all the insight that I was wanting. And then we got something in common, me and Ron. It's the thing that martial art is something that I postponed. I basically for a long part of my life. I was always fascinated with martial arts, but I just postponed myself for a long time. But I remember when I was a kid, I started watching the martial arts movie, and then also that's how he get hooked. He get hooked by watching martial arts movies on the cinema in Chinatown in New York. So we're kind of close, similar in that. But this is awesome. Be able to learn so many martial arts, helping people. That's awesome. But any of you also, I would like to say, if any of you know where he have his dojo, I believe he's from Brooklyn, but maybe he have his dojo somewhere in New York. So whoever know where Ron Van Clief have his dojo, please let me know in the comment below, because I tried to Google it and I cannot find the dojo of Ron Van Clief in New York. I know where is the one of Taimak. I know where Taimak is. It's in Manhattan. Taimak has a dojo in Manhattan, but anybody who knows where Ron Van Clief dojo is at in New York or any other part of the United States, please let me know and share your comment below. I hope that this can give you some light regarding the story of the Black Dragon. It was just amazing. I'm just happy. I didn't also know that he know Bruce Lee. So this is just fantastic, getting to know a little more of the Black Dragon. Thank you guys for watching. Please share your thoughts and your comment below, and I'll see you on my next video. Take care.